Starve or prosper. That's what's at stake with economics. Economics is the study of how to allocate resources in a world in which not
I think I know what's wrong. I think I know what's wrong. Ha! I fixed it. I fixed it. Nobody's gonna watch, but I fixed it. Oh my goodness. It's louder than shit though. I need to turn this up. Turn the mic up. Is that good now? What does it sound like if it peaks? Oh my goodness. It's louder than shit though. I need to turn this up. Turn the mic up. What does it sound like? Is that good now? Doesn't sound very bad if it peaks, so like I'm just gonna keep it like that. Okay. We're in business. Where are my glasses? Oh, they're right here. They're on my piano. I need to look intelligent. I am a fraud, pseudo-intellectual. Okay, so put this over here. Still figuring this shit out. Bada bing, bada boom. Look at that. 2 playbacks. Is anyone watching? Say hello, for fuck's sake. I'm just gonna put that in the chat. So, everything's working. We're all set. I had some audio issues. I'm gonna put a hat on because my hair looks bad. We'll go with the classic Lenin hat. I'm being like Hassan right now and just leaving the computer for an extended period of time, making the whole thing a very boring thing to watch. Except unlike Hassan, I'm correct and I know what Marxism is. Anyways, so there's this guy, right? I guess I'll just get to it. There's this guy. Whatifalthist. As in, what if alt history? And I don't like him. Gotta do window capture. This one. This one. Yes, this one. Order. Move to bottom. Ah, look at this. I'm good with computers. I know what I'm doing. So, made this video, right? Now, I kind of like this guy, but he's clearly, I don't want to say biased. I hate complaining about bias. Everyone has bias. The thing I respect about this guy is he's honest enough to state it outright at the beginning of the video, which you'll see. I respect that. Everyone has bias. I think people who try to like just be completely impartial all the time are kind of wasting their time. Because you're not really gonna, if you're impartial all the time, you're not really gonna make any sort of profound point. You're just going to be like dancing around any sort of conclusion. Whereas this guy, he's like, nah, I'm right wing. He is right wing. As you will see, he's clearly a capitalism enjoyer, which is cringe. As you can see, you can see his other videos, like, is China naturally authoritarian? He made the case that it is, which is honestly, like, I can respect that because it kind of is. I don't deny that they're authoritarian. For those of you who don't know me, I am supportive of China. I'm cautiously optimistic of China, is probably what I'd say. Cautiously optimistic. The overall goals of what they're doing are, I think they're noble. I think we should support them as working people. But they do some things that are not so great, I think. As for the Uyghur genocide, which I guess I have to address, I see no proof that it's a genocide. However, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's a good thing. Doesn't make me happy. I'll just say that. I don't think it's completely benevolent what they're doing. I'm pretty critical of it. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's just start. I have limited time. I tried to do this like last week or something, probably 2 weeks ago. It didn't work out because my audio was broken. So let's go.
Is your country going to starve or prosper? That's what's at stake with economics. Economics is the study of how to allocate resources in a world in which not everyone gets what they want. With a problem so important and open, it's easy to see that there'd end up being lots of different economic positions across history in the modern world, whether left, right, center, or off the chart. In this video, we're going to analyze the track record for how different sides of the political spectrum have managed the economy. We're going to see the three main economic philosophies of the modern world and what each of their strengths and weaknesses have been. Strap on for a controversial and exciting journey.
Okay, so I want to say, if you don't know who this guy is, he is very educated. I'll just say that I have respect for him, even though I think his political positions are not really the best informed. I think a lot of it comes from Americanized political economy, Americanized learning of history. However, he is fairly educated. Especially in the medieval era, things like that, European history. I like his videos on European history, and I actually do learn quite a bit from them. He always cites sources. I'd say he's a reputable guy. He's genuinely interested in educating people, and he makes it clear when he's making a video with an actual position, which I think is great. Yeah. If you're watching this, buddy, good job. Even though I think your capitalist apologism is unfounded and sort of ridiculous, as you'll find out, it's the overall thing that he's doing, I think, is great. But he said strap yourselves in. Okay, I will strap myself in for this. His music is really bad. My only criticism is his intro music. It's really stupid.
Right now, if you were to look up a news story...
There's an ad. I'm going to skip it.
Before we start, I want to address a couple things. The first of which is political bias. People are going to say before I start this video that I'm biased since I have a political position. I'm politically center-right, but this video isn't meant to be a right-wing rant. I try to be as objective with facts here as possible, looking at them through a purely utilitarian perspective of what has and hasn't worked across it.
This doesn't have anything in it. This is a prop. It's an edgy joke, okay? There's nothing in this.
Right. I'm going to point out the strengths and weaknesses inherent in each position. I will praise left-wing economics at parts of this video and condemn the right at others. There are other...
He does a lot more condemning of the left than the right, though. I'll just say that.
People act as if having any political judgment is bias. However...
These posters look like they were made by like someone on Reddit who plays a lot of Hearts of Iron. I've never played that game. And that's why I think people should take me seriously.
However, we live in a world of real-world solutions and failures. Looking backwards, we can generally agree that every era of history has done things that were just dumb or cruel, like Spanish mercantilism or the Roman slave economy. Like every other era of history, we have stuff like that we're doing right now, and I'm going to try to use evidence to show you what I think they are. Also, this is not a strict right-left binary.
Okay, I'm going to read this. To be frank, I don't think saying right or left is that useful in general. The right is normally characterized by its opposition to the left. Christian and Muslim fundamentalists, libertarians, monarchists, and the like are all classified as right since they've opposed left-wingers, but realistically these groups share basically nothing. I would somewhat agree with that. So I think what he's getting at is that I think putting politics on a spectrum is ridiculous, which is ironic because that's kind of how the internet works. Internet politics is very spectrum-based, and I find it kind of silly. It's really not how it works in the real world. The political compass is a silly test. It was made by libertarians to promote libertarianism. I just don't know why people still take it seriously. It's just not real. Put it that way.
Since I don't think that's a very useful prism to look at, since under a lot of circumstances, we see the right and the left have the same economic policies or the same side of the political spectrum of different politics. Tony Blair's Labour government in the early 2000s had more right-wing economic positions than the Tory conservative parties in the 1950s, for example. True. This is since the real economic breakdown isn't so much right or left. Across modern history, we've seen three different economic philosophies.
This is the part that's weird to me. This is just strange. Liberal, socialist, autarkic. You know, I've studied political economy for the past 4 years as an undergrad. Never heard of autarky or autarkic systems. This is a term I've never heard. Not in a history class, not in an economics class, not in a political science class, nothing. Never heard of autarky. This sounds made up.
And realistically, most countries are a combination of any one of these three. The first of which is liberal, or belief that the government should intervene in the economy as little as possible. The second is socialist, or that government should control the economy or be the economy, and the third is autarkic, or the economy should align with the nation's foreign policy. In briefer terms,
Sorry, I have to pronounce it in the Angloid way. Autarkic? Autarky? Like that.
Economy built around the capitalists, the government, and the foreign policy. I won't say any of these positions are for the people, since...
See, like, the argument that he makes in this, I've watched this before, I just wanted to address it, is that, you know, it's either an economy is run by capitalists, government, or for foreign policy goals. I don't like this, because it kind of denies that capitalism inherently, through placing so much power and the control of the economy in the hands of unaccountable capitalists, that their interests are to go abroad. I mean, do I really need to pull up a Michael Parenti clip? It's pretty obvious. It's as he said, it's the companies that went national and didn't go international died. Nobody remembers them anymore. That's because there were other companies going international. I would make the argument, there's somewhat of a debate here on the left, that there's sort of a debate between is the United States, is the state simply the representative of corporations, or are the corporations the state? I'd take the latter position. I'd say that corporations don't really tend to have national allegiance. They might invoke it for the purpose sort of gaining support for invasions, for certain government actions, foreign policy actions against a given country. But whatever, getting sidetracked again.
All of these positions claim that, and being for the people is impossible since the people never make economic or regulatory decisions in a real sense, with the ruling class, whether democratically elected or dictatorially, doing so. The ugly truth is that the most common economic form is none of these, just corruption and random stealing, which is the rule of the day in much of the
Corruption and random stealing, that sounds like this green country on this map. It sounds oddly like this one country that's to the north of me, or to the south of me. Both, technically, if you go far enough. And, you know, the countries that they're stealing from tend to be these, like, red ones. Especially, this one over here. Let's hear him out.
third world. Places like Argentina and the Congo can technically be operating under any one of these three economic philosophies, but realistically, for all of them...
Sorry, I should make this point. This guy shows a lot of maps, but he kind of just he's like, here's a map, accept it as fact. And that's it. Never really explains it. He doesn't really have any text explaining it. He's just like, here's the map, look at it. This proves what I'm saying. And a lot of the time, these maps, for example, corruption, is something that would be very important when you're looking at this map is, how is this measured to make this map? It's a lot like that economic freedom map that everyone puts out there. Support capitalism enjoyers put out there. To say these places have more economic freedom. Meanwhile, they're not really saying what economic freedom means. What does it mean? Economic freedom for elites is the inverse of economic freedom for working people. And I mean, it's proven time and time again. But I think he shows that later. We'll get to that.
They'd be more dominated by the corruption and inefficiency that have plagued all their government.
Also, okay. You know what's weird? You know what's weird about this map? This country here, you know what this is? This one? You see the cursor, right? That's Saudi Arabia. Also, this one here is this little green guy. He's more green than Saudi Arabia. Also, Canada's very green. That's surprising. But these two countries here, you're gonna tell me that they have no corruption when they've killed countless journalists? Also, it looks like Israel is green. You're gonna tell me that Israel has the most amount of jailed, imprisoned journalists per capita, and you're gonna tell me that there's no corruption there, that there's at least very light corruption? You had Benjamin Netanyahu last year, not even last year, it was a few months ago, trying to basically install himself as the lifelong. That's why they have elections all the time lately. He's trying to basically consolidate power, and he's fully able to under their constitution. You're gonna tell me that they're not corrupt? Saudi Arabia is run by an oil oligarchy, which has become a monarchy, and chopped up a journalist in 2018, and flushed him down a toilet because he was reporting their corruption. This map is just, I can't believe this. Venezuela, right? Apparently corruption is only when you do things that the US doesn't want you to. And they tried to do a cool little thing here where they make US a little bit green, a little bit less green than all the other ones. Venezuela, right? had elections for Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, overseen by countless independent watchdog organizations. And they were deemed legitimate elections. Their leadership, although I'm critical of Maduro, is popular. I'll get into the criticisms of Maduro later, maybe, but it's a popular leadership, that party. I forget what it's called, but it's a popular government. Popular socialist government. But it's red here. What else has Venezuela done? Well, they imprisoned some mercenaries that were sent over, some private mercenaries that were sent over to overthrow the Bolivarian government. As any government would, capitalist or socialist. It's simply ridiculous that he just flashes this map up here. And it's like, yep, there you go. The West is very great. There's no corruption. Nothing to be spoken of. Saudi Arabia, great country. Definitely no corruption. It's just really strange to me.
Across history. The main point you need to understand here is that groups follow their incentive structures whether or not that's the intention that was put in place. Each of these positions creates incentive structures in society that are good for some things and bad for others. Each of these political positions do at least one thing well and one thing poorly, since any worldview has to leave things out in order to provide a comprehensive framework that makes sense. Let's look at each of these views. The first time liberalism as a conscious philosophy was articulated was in the 18th century in Britain and France under the Physical.
What? See, already I can't really take this seriously. It seems like he's forgotten something. Liberalism, I mean, I wouldn't say it really came from anywhere. But like one thing that I'd say that we have to keep in mind is that economically, at least, Adam Smith was sort of at least the first prolific classical liberal author or theorist. And that was when? He said 18th century. When was Wealth of Nations written? Which I've actually read, by the way. And so I know that the invisible hand idea is literally mentioned twice or 3 times, and it's not the main thesis of the book. Anyways. 1776. So, I mean, yeah, I suppose.
They believe that the way to make a country wealthier was for the government to be involved in the economy as little as possible. This was at odds with the mercantilist view that was dominant, which was autarkic, and we'll talk about later. They believe that the government should try to manage the economy.
Okay. So, mercantilism. Mercantilism is like this really funny word to me. Mercantilism, a lot of people, you look in social studies in Canada at least, like when we learned it in high school, right? The 3 big ideologies. We learn about like liberalism, communism, and fascism. That's at least like the big 3 of the 20th century. But when they teach liberalism, which is the main point of the course, since we live in a liberal republic, sort of. Well, Canada, not really a republic, but when they teach it, basically what they say is Adam Smith was critiquing mercantilism. Now, it's pretty shaky history, I think. Mercantilism, I don't think, is a sufficient definition of the dominant economic system, at least the hegemonic system in place at that time. Mercantilism has its base in feudalism. It's simply the foreign extension of feudalism. And I think that like that sort of stipulation is really sort of neglected by these people. Like, you never learn about feudalism in social studies in high school. At least here, I'm sure you don't in the United States, because the United States education. Anyways, just a little thing.
And so there'd always be as much physical gold in that country as possible. Afterwards, the English-speaking countries like the US and Britain embraced liberalism, to which it spread around the rest of the world to...
Okay, here it is. Here it is. I was waiting for this. What was that one that he showed for like 2 seconds? There's no labels. Ah, that's like the British Empire. What? What is going on here? Because, like, Brittany, which is a region of France, the pointy bit, why is that there? What? I think this is the British Empire. Because there's, like, islands here, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Quebec, and... What is going on? None of it is this territory, right, of Canada. If you're American, you probably don't know that, because you don't know anything unless it's about America, but none of it became a territory the year I was born, 1999. In fact, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to dox myself, Jesus. But, what is going on, man? Because, like, this map could simultaneously be from, like, you know, the 19th century, but also, like, now. Except they don't... I'm just so confused. I'm just gonna ignore it. He showed it for 2 seconds anyways.
In countries like the US and Britain embraced liberalism, to which it spread around...
This is the one I want to talk about. Now, look at the sources. First of all, I'm going to zoom in on this. Right? So look. How do I... Where's the cursor? It's not showing the cursor. So, you see article and sources. I'm in really shit quality right now. I gotta turn it up. Do that. Do you see it? How much.net, economic freedom, GDP per capita. Okay. Next one, heritage.org. What is that? What's heritage.org? Let's find out. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong based on where it comes from. It's just that you need to keep in mind where it's coming from. Heritage.org. I wanted, like, the Heritage Foundation. Conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C. That's very interesting. They really like Reagan. They really liked George H.W. What do they think about Clinton? They didn't like him because of welfare. Right. George W., one of the most murderous presidents in human history, in U.S. history. They liked him. They defended him for Guantanamo Bay practices. Didn't like Obama. I don't even have to read this. What do you think about Trump? Actually, I don't know. I already know who they are. Anyone who's into the politics stuff knows what the Heritage Foundation is. I mean, it's like a household name. No any transition, no other... what do they think of him? Played a prominent role in the immigration policies. So they are a fan. They were fans. Which doesn't mean immediately, like, they're terrible. All of the hype around Trump, I think, is really silly. But, yeah, so that's where it comes from. And then the IMF, International Monetary Fund. You can't see that because I'm in the way. Shit. Sorry, rude word. I'm trying to keep it clean. So IMF right there. Right there. And it's not showing the cursor, but you can see, right? I'm talking to no one right now, but maybe you'll watch this later. So let's look at the countries then. Venezuela, of course, has to be red. Venezuela can't do anything right. Apparently Australia is like turbo economically free. I mean, they got, people selling heroin to 8-year-olds and stuff. That's being hyperbolic, but like Libya's not ranked for some reason. That's interesting. Switzerland, which is literally a tax haven, and where people go to launder money, is very green. So it seems like all the countries that are very good for investment and very good for the people from this country. You can't see this one to the west over here with mine above it. If they're good to them, then they're economically free. Algeria? Oh man, it's a hellhole. There's no freedom there. I'm surprised that China is not red. Afghanistan, gotta invade them because they're red. Bolivia even is red. Like, it's just it's completely normative. How do you measure this? How do you measure this? Maybe after I'm done watching this, I'll actually go look at the sources and see how they got these sorts of numbers. Like, how do they get this coefficient? I've never fully investigated this, but I see this everywhere. I've even seen this in my classes, this map. And they're always just plastering it everywhere. They absolutely love it. I find it weird that France is yellow and Ukraine... No, that's Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is yellow. Ukraine is red, though. Huh. There's no data for Syria or Iraq. Interesting. See, Saudi Arabia is yellow, which is weird to me. Because if it's also a tax haven. Oh, but UAE, that's green. It's good. You can go, take all your money there. UAE, by the way, has this thing. They get a lot of foreign workers from India, where they come over, and their bosses basically just take their passports, and they're like, "Yeah, you're stuck here now. You're just gonna work for like below minimum wage." I don't even know if they have a minimum wage in UAE. Let's look it up. Minimum wage. Do they have one? Has no set minimum wage rate. So, interesting. Let's do a little comparison. Actually, let's look up map of economic equality. What is this? Open the bloody map. Where does this come from? Global Wealth Data Book. Okay. I mean, it seems like it's just trying to like compile. The thing is, the economic inequality is actually measurable. Economic freedom really depends on what you define as freedom. Freedom is a very normative term. In fact, like in philosophy classes, they'll tell you not to use the word because it's not a concrete thing. All right. So let's compare here. UAE is orange. The United States is like the United States and Russia, as well as Sweden. This is a country that everyone thinks, all of the weird democratic socialists in the States think is some sort of socialist utopia. It's as bad as Russia in the US. Sweden has a flat tax of 10 or 15%, I believe. Even Germany's pretty bad. Netherlands, sorry, rude word again. Netherlands is like terrible. I'm surprised that Switzerland is this good, but it must be because only rich people live there. I don't know what the circles are about. See, look at Saudi Arabia. Like, it's pretty bad. So is India. What is this? Oh, that's also India. I forgot that's part of it. So I mean, you compare that to this. It seems like all the most unequal, all the most, well, it's not a word, all the most, like, the highest inequality countries seem to all be green. That's very interesting. Okay. I'll just let that speak for itself. At least I'm actually explaining the maps. I'm not just being like, here, look at this map. I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to talk about how the data was gathered. No, that would be a waste of time. Anyways.
Around the rest of the world, to the point in which most countries in the world today are at least part of their economy being built off liberal foundations. A deep point to make here is that in America, the term liberal has been confused with left-winger, which is deeply ironic since the right's now more liberal in a traditional sense. Here we're going to use the term liberal to mean a person who thinks the government should have little influence over the economy and individuals as possible. Liberalism took surprisingly long to develop since it goes against the grain of history. Almost all of political history has been divided between too much order and too much chaos. Government was built to deal with the chaos of the world, whether invaders, barbarians, starvation, etc., and the governments that developed often became quite authoritarian and arbitrary, since in the choice between the chaos of the world and a stable tyranny, most people were willing to accept authoritarianism.
That's true.
If you look at most civilizations, you alternate between a stable, centralized empire that ushers in the golden age and era.
See, now he's, for some reason, brought up a map of the Eastern and Western Roman Empire. This looks like it would be about, oh god, what year would this be? If the Visigoths are there, the Alemanni, that's what I am. Alemanni, Schwäbisch. That's where my lineage is. So Anglo-Saxons, Franks. Oh, so Britannia is still here. This would probably be, what, like 500 AD? Around that? I hope I'm not wrong. I'd feel like an idiot. It would be around there, though. Maybe 5th century. 5th century AD or something. Cool.
Of civil war, discord, and barbarian invasion. Look at how Westerners still idolize the Roman Empire while whitewashing its corruption, slavery, and countless civil wars.
That's a good
Intentions matter a lot to human beings, and so people like the idea.
This guy was a Chad. Assassination of Julius Caesar by Michael Parenti. Read it. Fantastic book.
Powerful centralized government looking out for them. The law always was beneath the ruler. The system that eventually got to liberalism over several centuries started in medieval Europe where there was no strong political authority. The continent was divided...
Excuse me? You're like 800 years early. What?
Between countless petty kingdoms, duchies, city-states, and church-lands. This meant that in order to get any edge, medieval lords started to sign their political rights away to cities and merchants. The lack of political authority meant two things. The market and the law were gradually elevated above political authority in northwestern Europe. However, this was still an extremely illiberal system, and liberalism as a system only started to develop in northwestern Europe in the 18th century. The dominant tenet behind liberalism is belief that the law is superior to the judgment of social superiors. England was able to reach this stage since they literally had a civil...
See, this kind of represents the idealism of this guy's way of thinking. He's kind of talking about things in terms of just like voluntary sort of normative beliefs. Like, oh yeah, Europe just woke up one day and decided liberalism good. The rule of law is what's going to govern our society. It doesn't just happen. There's a clear material reason for it. To think otherwise is unscientific. It just simply is. But I'm sure that'll expose itself more as the video progresses.
War in which the side that believed the law was superior to the ruler won and installed an aristocratic democracy. All the strengths and weaknesses of liberalism come from this key point: belief in the law's superiority to the current ruler. The strength of liberalism is that it allows massive creations and wealth. The main thing that's held back the creation of wealth is not having enough stability.
Okay, what's this? International Property Rights Index. See, this is another thing that is a little bit easier to measure, but property rights is sort of a shaky ground. Property rights depends on what sort of property. I mean, like, we all know that the right wing likes to just lump in personal property with private property, with capital, with, I hate using the term means of production, but means of production. This is a really classic case of that. See, yeah, Venezuela doesn't have as much capital ownership in private hands. Does that necessarily mean that there's property rights that are being violated? I don't really think so. People are still fully able to own their homes. There is government ownership of homes. However, it's used to social ends in the concrete. To simply say, oh, they don't really own these homes. Yeah, but they have homes. The purpose of such a scheme, of such a way of organizing the economy, is to allow for people to have homes. It's the same thing with China. Anyways.
That would make big investments worthwhile. People are willing to build massive factories, work longer hours, and the like if they know the investment will pay off. And liberalism...
By the way, I live in this country. Oh, the cursor's showing again. Cool. This country is having a real hard time right now with rent increasing and home prices skyrocketing. It's honestly, I don't like making predictions, but because 99% of the time they'll turn out to be just a little bit incorrect. But I'm sort of anticipating, as someone who's studied economics for a while, housing crisis in North America, if not more countries. There's a lot going on in Germany right now too. There's been a lot of rent strikes in Germany as a result of extremely high rent. Now, I'm just saying, places like China, which have housing programs, are not having this issue. And I doubt that they will come out of this year or next year in a terrible housing crisis like we will. But I digress.
Which involves very little government intervention in the economy supplies that. Property rights, or that people know the law will protect their property, are the most important thing for economic growth. In the modern world, countries with good property rights become wealthy and those without don't. It's often that simple.
What did you just say? That was a genuine reaction. Well, that was embarrassing. What is this? Let me back that up.
Countries with good property rights become wealthy and those without don't. It's often that simple. The big people protect their property are the most important thing for economic growth. In the modern world, countries with good property rights become wealthy and those without don't. It's often that simple. The big problem liberals...
Do I really need to address that? Okay, whatever.
Often fail to see is that property rights are dependent upon having an already stable society. A major point libertarian...
Okay, here's another corruption map, which seems to be different. A little bit. I'd agree Russia is very corrupt. Don't really know why a lot of leftists defend Russia. Maybe their foreign policy positions? Even then, invasion of Crimea was silly and shouldn't have happened. Again, the only countries that are like not purple are just Western Europe, just France and Germany. Switzerland looks very yellow, bright yellow. In the West, I wonder why. I wonder what the source is on this one. I gotta put this in 1080.
Miss is that they often...
It's not very good quality. You can't even read it. Shit. Can't see. If I get out of full screen. I can't read the source. I'm going to comment about this. At 7:26, I can't read the source for the map. If you're going to thoughtlessly shellac... How do you spell shellac? Is it like shellac? I'm not gonna use that word. Thoughtlessly paste maps into your videos. People should probably know where the data came from. Communism will win. No, I'm not gonna put that. There we go. He better read it. I better get a reply.
Been pushed to remove government power, even when they really need the government to stabilize property rights. Look at Russia or Brazil, which have struggled with liberalism since their governments aren't stable or functioning enough to protect people's property fairly.
What?
Attempting liberal policies and...
What? It's like his definition of defending property changes, like, depending on what he's talking about. Like, Russia really does defend the property of a very small group of people. Very, very small group of people. And they do a great job of it. They have ever since the 90s. I wonder what happened in the 90s which made them do that.
These places is literally just giving money and power to the corrupt rich. Having no state doesn't get you to liberalism. It results in savage warlords enslaving their opponents. However, liberalism under fair conditions' ability to make money is tremendous. The results are often...
So he's showing China's GDP growth as a gotcha, as in, like, this is why liberalism works. It's just... Why? Why? Even a lot of capitalism enjoyers tend to think that China is like some capitalist paradise. What are you talking about? I wouldn't say it's socialist, but I'd say it's a very successful dictatorship of the proletariat. It's one that's survived for a very long time. Through a lot of reforms and, liberalization of economies in the 80s. Liberalization not meaning like we went fully liberal, but as in just sort of opening things up more, using a lot more free trade. trying to get a lot more foreign investment, a lot more foreign capital. And does that necessarily mean that they are a liberal economy? I really don't think so. You don't get away with things as a capitalist in China if they are not to the benefit of the social good. You just simply don't. You will not survive. Sometimes literally. And I think it's great.
Been completely stunning. Look at India, China, and Eastern Europe, and much of Latin America, who experienced stunning economic growth over the last few decades once they switched to liberal economic policies.
Okay.
The world's major shifts to liberal...
This is really funny when he shows this graph. He did this in another video. So, the thing with South Asia, East Asia and Pacific. East Asia and Pacific. There's a country in East Asia and Pacific. It's called China, which he just said was capitalist. So, number of people in extreme poverty. Projections for 2030. They think it's gonna plateau here. This is weird to me because sub-Saharan Africa is is this per capita? I wish I could see. Oh, this is number of people. So this is not per capita. I wonder if I can find a map. People in poverty per capita. World map. Share of population in extreme poverty. So I mean, you look at sub-Saharan Africa, because the thing is, they don't have a lot of population, despite the fact that that Africa is their median age in a lot of African countries is very low. People on average are very young, therefore they produce a lot more kids, right? That's what happens. But if you look at per capita, it's just horrendous. You look at Dr. Congo here, it's getting to the point of probably 70% or something. Maybe not that much, but it's up there. Madagascar, it's just awful. Yemen, I find it funny that there's nothing for Saudi Arabia. If you look at the other maps, it's pretty similar. That's not even what I'm looking for. Percentage of people, percentage of population. So these are black here. What is this? That would be. Which Istan is that? Is that Turkmenistan? I always confuse them. I gotta fix my geography. It's roughly the same in every single map that you look at. Dr. Congo's doing really bad in all of them. It looks roughly the same. You get the point. Let's close this one. So I mean, I think that presenting it as just number of people, I think, is a little dishonest.
And then both the 19th century and the end of the 20th have precipitated the eras of the fastest economic...
Also, let's look at how, East Asia has a lot of population. China has 1.4 billion people, almost 1.5. Literally almost a sixth of the world's population. And they're at that level. That's amazing. That's fantastic. I have nothing but support for China for that reason. But apparently this guy, he's it's capitalism that did that. When, if you look, sort of 2010 is when it really started to peter out. 2000, I can't really see because he makes it so friggin' small, but I'm just saying, you need to really take these things with a grain of salt. This guy kind of just sees something, he's oh, I agree with this, let's put it in the video.
growth ever. I often get told I have a pro-capitalism bias, but
Yeah,
literally
you do.
when something works better than any other system all the time, you just have to come to the conclusion it's a
All
better
the time.
system. Politics is like hammer,
All
so
the
just try to
time.
buy the one that works. I often hear that liberal politics are
So, like,
heartless.
is capitalism working in Africa? Because that's what they have in sub-Saharan Africa. I'd challenge anyone to tell me that they're communists there. In the past, some of them have been, very briefly, but under a lot of siege, and under constant. It's really sort of like the Soviet Union under constant siege psychology. It was more war communism than socialism or anything like that.
Inhumane, but consistently they've been extremely liberating. The thing that ended the power of feudalism in medieval Europe was the rise of capitalism. Ethnic minorities
Okay.
like the Jews or overseas Chinese were able to deal with constrictive and oppressive societies due to their skills at the market. Black people were successful in private industry far before they were accepted in non-profit organizations like government or universities. The introduction of liberal policies have resulted in
It's
billions of
debatable.
people being lifted out of poverty around.
It's not my place to say. World population living in extreme poverty. Okay. Could this be not because of any system, but could it be just that we have more capabilities, that our supply chains have improved? I wonder if it could be any of that. Which supply chains, regardless of the economic system, they work a certain way. People trade with the same ships. They trade along the same routes. The routes have gotten shorter in many cases. Ships have gotten faster. It's been cheaper to ship things. It's just, there's no real elaboration here. And I just find it so strange.
The world. It always amused me that feminists often go off against capitalism, but women have gotten far more latitude in capitalist societies than non-capitalist ones,
Oh, man, he
which are
went
based
there.
upon patronage in the old boys club.
What does he say here? He has Margaret Thatcher for some reason and Gorbachev, both very gross people. After the Second World War, liberal capitalist societies were significantly less sexist and racist than socialist ones. How could you possibly make that case? How could you possibly make that case just because Margaret Thatcher was the prime minister? Are you serious? Oh man, this guy. Look at how basically no socialist country had a female leader, while liberal countries like Britain and Canada did. We get told about Soviet women doctors while not hearing that being a doctor was not very prestigious in the Soviet Union. It was in Cuba. It was in Burkina Faso, which was short-lived, but it was. Being the Soviet Union's the first country to send a woman to space. They had women's organizations. East Germany was far ahead of any capitalist nation in reproductive rights, in women's rights entirely. I would absolutely challenge anyone to bring up a country that was further ahead in any of these things than the GDR at this time. Regardless of how you feel about the GDR, I don't want a bunch of angry Germans, was zum Teufel, Ost schlecht. I don't want them in my comments, even though they'll probably never see this. But regardless of how you feel about it, they were very far ahead in terms of women's rights. They're one of the first countries in which, if you had an abusive spouse, you could actually get them locked up, taken away. There was a hotline. It was one of the first countries. Canada. I'm going to say triggering words, the R word. Sorry. Canada, not the R-E word, the R-A word. Canada, until I think like 1988, 89, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it was in the 80s. You could not sue your spouse for raping you until the late 80s. In Canada. This is a country that we are told is very progressive. That I've grown up all my life hearing is very progressive. We care about our people and our women. Women have it good here. This is just an absurd claim. And I think he knows it's absurd. I'm genuinely mad at this. This is the only thing I'm genuinely very mad at. What is the last thing? Likewise, Soviet policies were wary of non-Russians, like they were terrified of the growing Turkic birth rate. Citation? Okay.
Being sexist or racist lowers profit margins. If women are really being paid 76 cents for every dollar a man makes, I'm just gonna...
Once you account for hours worked, experience in children, the gender pay gap vanishes. Let's look at the data here. What's going on here? Gender pay gap in the U.S. has remained stable in recent years, but is narrower among young workers. Pew Research Center. So all workers ages 16 plus. Median hourly earnings of U.S. women as percentage of men's median among. Okay, 16 plus. It's gone up. Okay, good. It's gone up. Okay. At least he's acknowledging the pay gap. Except then he kind of says this thing at the bottom that's a little weird. So you count for hours worked, experience in children. He needs to elaborate further on this. What is he saying? How does it vanish? Alright.
Hire more women since they're still good workers. People often seem to think capitalism is a racket by the rich, which is true in a lot of countries, but doesn't seem to make sense in developed Western ones. Look at how the most successful companies...
Yes, entirely different today because in 1970 we didn't have computers. There's no, it's just... It's not... it was just capitalism running how it as usual. It wasn't any sort of profound thing that changed the entire economic system. Which, by the way, I think that Marxists, especially ones in academia, really need to make a case for how technology has affected the growth of capitalism and the functioning of capitalism. Because I think it's some Marxists have, but it's remained not really a big mainstream part of mainstream Marxist theory. Anyways. Yes, and the rich people have changed. Okay.
Fluctuate decade by decade, with the richest companies often taking massive losses over short periods. Capitalists aren't artificially exploiting labor. The amount of money people make is literally the same as their productivity and the supply of labor.
Guys, I know nobody's watching, but I misspelled productivity. Shit. Hit my pop filter there, but I'm just doing what he does. He just puts a graph up there. Look, and he goes, look, I'm smart. This guy is a college dropout, and it kind of shows. I don't want to be mean, but he should have stayed in school longer. Because he wouldn't get away with this. You just simply would not get away with this in an actual academic setting. It's just incredibly dishonest. Real wages. What does he do here? Does he do nominal wages? Real wage. Where's the source? Where's the source? There's no source. There's no source. There's a big surprise there. well-being measures. What is going on? Okay, employment has gone down. Also, this is only up to 2,000. See, like here, everything's kind of big.
If you control for those, you get wages across.
Oh, by the way, while we're at it, even though he thinks that China is capitalist, and real wages, by the way, if you don't know, so nominal wages are just like what's on your paycheck. It's that. Real wages account for purchasing power. So like, and if you're doing it internationally, you got purchasing power parity, which is it's a whole economics lesson. But search. Go. I don't know why I didn't do it. It's not really any numbers here. Where's productivity? What? Labor shares. None of these are China. I remember I had to look pretty high, pretty long for this. Productivity growth. Labor productivity and wages in the manufacturing sector. GDP per capita. No, GDP. Purchasing power parity per person employed. Urban manufacturing. Hourly compensation. So GDP measures economic output, if you don't know. Basically, I had a viewer at some point. That's cool. Yeah, GDP is everything at final sale that the economy produces, right? Urban manufacturing, hourly compensation per employee. We can see that it basically follows the line. It's a little bit lower than the line. They still have to make a profit. That still ultimately has to happen. They still have to accrue surplus value. I never said that China is perfectly socialist. However, employment works to social ends. And corporations work to social ends. This whole rhetoric about corporations create the jobs, therefore we need to uphold them. Well, it's somewhat true, and it would be true in China's sense. Now, is that biased? Just because, like, it's for China but not for the West? No, because China's economy is geared towards social ends. And it's visible here. Where does this come from? The Economist. This is the fucking Economist. Sorry. It's a rude word again. The Economist is a bourgeois rag of a newspaper. Fine. Good news, but may prove hard for government to manage. I have to pay to read this, so I don't want to do that. Inseparable. That's just another thing. Productivity boost. China's growth is driven by increasing productivity, not adding people. Yeah, there you go. Labor productivity. Anyways, you get the point. It's why? This guy just sees this graph and he's just like, yes, I will put that in the video.
History. Labor in the third world isn't exploited since they're paid less than wealthier countries. It's just that labor is inherently less productive, and so...
What? Okay. I mean, half right, half wrong. So, Africa's very productive in the sense that it has a very low median age. As in, like, people are young. I mentioned that earlier. To say that it's not productive, though, Canada has many mines there. Africa is where most of the world's raw commodities come from. the not oil, but well, in some countries in Sahara, Algeria, I think, is a pretty big oil producer. This is where most of the world's commodities come from, including like rubber, especially in here. To say that it's not productive, I think, kind of discounts that a lot of this labor is... I'm trying to find the right way to put this into words. Because, I mean, it's not like he's exactly wrong, but if you did not have this labor, you wouldn't really have the labor happening here, and here, and here, and here, and especially here. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. I'll just keep it simple.
If those people weren't paid less than people in wealthier countries, they'd never have jobs in the first place. People also talk about how capitalism naturally ends in monopoly. This isn't true. Monopolies are normally outcompeted against unless they're already providing a service as efficiently as possible.
What on earth are you talking about? Capitalism does not tend towards monopoly. Read it. Read it. Read this book. Read this book. I know it's scary and it's by this guy that you don't like, probably. But you gotta read this, man. You gotta read this. There's actual numbers in here. Look at this. You like numbers. They really get your rocks off. I know you. You love your numbers. Look at these numbers. It's got all that and more in this book. Okay? I'm just gonna say that. I don't really want to give a rundown of how capitalism tends towards monopoly because I think it's a waste of time. It's obvious. And I have to pee. I will be back shortly. Gotta mute my microphone. I'm going to sit on the toilet and think about this video. And think about what it has done to my psyche. Okay, I'll be back. I'm back. Okay, let's get this over. We're not even halfway through. This is gonna take forever.
Since in a free market, a company that's charging overly high prices is just asking for a competitor to arise and undercut them. The only evidence we have of extortionate monopolies are those that have corruptly lobbied governments in order to control...
Try developing a business that can outcompete Amazon, or Walmart. What are you going to do that they are not doing? And no, that doesn't mean that they're more innovative. It means that they've captured so much of the market. They have accumulated so much capital. You'll learn about it in that book. They've accumulated so much capital that it is nearly impossible to just imitate them or do something otherwise in order to outcompete them. And that's the whole point. That's their plan. It's not an evil plan. It's not because these people are bad or morally corrupt. It's because that's the way that capitalism works. And it's been shown to work that way over the past century, even 2 centuries. And yes, monopolies have come and gone, but this has mostly had to do with different technology. I find it weird how this guy is so educated, yet he doesn't understand this.
Their field,
Makes me sad.
Sadly happens a lot.
It's important to differentiate between natural monopolies like Google, which provide a service that competitors can't undercut, competitors, nice typo there, bro, and monopolies that survive due to government contracts like airlines, eyeglasses, or cable companies. Eyeglasses, oh boy, Luxottica. One thing that's kind of cool, which maybe, is a case for you can outcompete, because, there's not a vast change in technology. Well, I suppose there is. You could attribute it to a vast change in technology. I got these glasses. My glasses here. These are $30. Prescription glasses. From Zenny Optical. Sponsor me. Don't actually do that. Why would they sponsor someone with 4 playbacks and 1 concurrent viewer? And they're doing something good, because Luxottica, if you don't know, Luxottica is the company that owns most of the eyeglass companies. And they essentially developed a monopoly. So that's maybe a good case. However, they're doing something different. The way that Zenny works, if you don't know, I think Zenny is a Canadian thing. I think in the States you got Warby Parker that does the same thing as Zenny. Is they have a service where you can try on the glasses online with a special camera thing, and it fits them to your face. I think Warby Parker just sends you a bunch of pairs, and they get your facial dimensions from the camera too. They just send you a bunch of pairs of glasses, and you try them on. You take the one that you want, pay for it, you send the other ones back. Pretty cool, right? Which I think it's great. I like these glasses. They were cheap. They weren't like Luxottica glasses that are $700 sometimes even $1,000 if it's a really heavy prescription. I think that's cool, but that's attributed to a change in technology, not really capitalism's naturally competitive nature. Anyways. Oh, I have to do this.
Even in countries like America or the UK. These companies normally lobby under the guise of safety and protection, saying their competitors aren't doing things properly for the public's interests. However, with all its immense benefits, liberal economics does have a couple downsides that are systemically built in. The first is that although free markets do normally reset, it doesn't say anywhere it has to be a good reset. Human beings are a resource like any other. The Black Death or crises like the
Human beings are a resource like any other, okay.
30 Years' War were caused since the market was oversaturated with human lives and it was reaching equilibrium through millions of deaths. A major weakness of liberals is they ignore baseline stuff that you need. An example is welfare in schools. Let's say there's a mentally ill
He's
poor
a social
person.
democrat.
If they're living in Les Miserables poverty in a wealthy country with no welfare, their kids who could be living on the street will probably permanently end up in the underclass. You need to have the state force people to have schooling up to a certain age, since no parent should have the choice to forever keep their kids from functioning in society without letting those kids have a choice in the matter.
Okay,
Likewise, welfare allows people who have been down on their luck but are still productive members of society to permanently not fall into a poverty trap. Take investment in education, which is the best predictor of wealth both on a societal and individual level there is, but normally isn't factored into a market equation. Or infrastructure individuals. Take productive members of society to permanently not fall into a poverty trap. Take investment in education, which is the best predictor of wealth both on a societal and
Okay. Best predictor of wealth. And this correlates to the wealth graph. So what he's saying is correct.
Individual level there is, but normally isn't factored into a market equation. Or
7 pillars of influence in a city. Government, family, business, media, education, religion, arts, and entertainment. This looks like something in a high school textbook. It says that my stream is bad. What? No data. What? Says my bitrate is good. Uh-oh. Okay, well, it's good now.
More infrastructure investment, a functioning military and police system, etc. Radical libertarians or crypto people often want to remove the government, which would be the worst thing to do here. Okay. Right-wingers and libertarians often don't focus on the effects of inequality at all.
Global inequality causes political goals, exploitation of poor countries, tax avoidance, lack of education, lack of innovation, insecurity regarding property rights, low investment incentives for firms, low living quality, regional factors, wars, consumption behavior, natural disasters. This is mostly agreeable. It's a little bit reductive. Let's just move on.
But realistically, inequality is deleterious effects of all of the things that produce a stable society that lets the market function well. Whether social mobility, education, health, and all the fundamentals that let a market function effectively. The environment is the perfect capstone example of this. A pure liberal system only pays attention to profit. However, the environment is something we need to figure out for us to live in, as well as just being pleasant and beautiful. However, the market hasn't figured out how to cover the costs involved, so the environment's treated as if it has no value. This in turn could cause a climate catastrophe resulting in millions of deaths. The key problem of a purely liberal economic system is that it treats anything without a material value as worth zero, whether family, nation, environment, or free time. Liberalism's also extremely difficult to maintain in that it goes against human nature. People are inherently tribal and feeling-based, and like the idea of the leaders of their tribe.
People are inherently tribal and feeling-based. Inherently. I don't know about inherently. I think there's certain things which exacerbate it, or don't. I think that saying inherently... I think that... I'll go on a little rant here. Again, why not? Saying humans are innately or inherently any which way is shaky ground to me. It's somewhat unscientific. Sometimes it's warranted. There are a few constants of human nature which you could definitely apply. However, this sort of really static view of human nature, I think, is fundamentally it's unscientific and it's uncritical. It leads to the death of social criticism, which I think is what this guy is suffering from. Okay, not a big rant, but I'll just say that.
Who are struggling to help them. The idea that a giant impersonal system that statistically helps people much more being in charge rather than one of them who's trying to help them is horrifying to many people. Whenever I hear critiques of capitalism, I hear, why isn't someone of my tribe, whether intellectuals, my ethnic group, in charge rather than this stupid system that keeps on telling me I'm not as important or worthwhile as I feel like I am?
What does he have to say about socialism?
Well, time to move from a system that's been very effective and unpopular to one that's been continually popular but has a far worse track record. Socialist economic policies are those that give the government and bureaucrats more power. People talk about real communism, which has supposedly never been tried, to which my reply is, if Christians don't get to talk about the kingdom of heaven not being realized, why do communists get to treat real communism as a political option, given that both are fantasies that involve changing human nature? Left-wingers like to say they give the people more power, which is objective.
Remember, in the market, normal people added together have more influence than the rich. But in socialism, it's always top-down. He's gonna say it's when the government does stuff, isn't it? Isn't he? Well, I mean, at the beginning of the video, he said it's a government-run economy. I need something real quick. It's really important. I need this. I need a friend to help me out with this. We can continue now. He will give me power. I don't actually like Stalin that much, by the way. This is a joke. Okay? Just before anyone yells at me, if you watch this later.
Not true, and that the market is on the whole controlled by the decisions of ordinary people, and socialists advocate giving government authorities more power. We've seen socialistic policies since the dawn of time. Ancient Egypt, Rome, China, or the Inca had economic policies pretty similar to that.
The Inca... Okay, Stalin, you're going over here. The Inca... I think with the Incas, like, I would actually contend that the Inca had very close to what I'd call a primitive communist system. Like, fully communistic. We're talking about, like, a network of distribution that was from each according to their ability to each according to their need. I would absolutely say that the Inca had that. If you look at the way that the Inca worked, it's very reminiscent, I suppose, of communism. Very primitive. However, I would contend that it's absolutely a microcosm, a primitive microcosm of what communism would look like. I don't want to get into it because there's not enough time, but
modern left-wing governments. Whenever big governments have had the power, they've tried to exert it upon the economy, which is totally understandable since it's inside their self-interest. I've gotten shit for saying ancient Egypt was socialist, which is definitionally not true, since they didn't explicitly say they were part of socialist ideology. However, the way I read history is that I try to see how people act, and when two things tend to look or act the same, I just say they're the same. However, socialism as a modern ideology started with Karl Marx in the mid-19th century as a response to how painful industrialization was, and the horrifying conditions of the poor, caused largely by overpopulation at the time.
Oh, it's overpopulation that did it. It was overpopulation that did it. Like... It was over... Oh, man, this guy's literally a Malthusian. In his other videos, he talks a lot about, like, population. He acknowledges that overpopulation is a problem, which is how anyone can do that and call themselves a good historian, I think, is really funny. Like...
To become more influential at the turn of the 20th century, with capitalist governments choosing more socialist policies and 1/3 of the human race under communist governments, in which the government controlled the whole economy. At this point, we're going to split this movement between its...
Okay, wait a minute, actually. Let's look at this map and see if it's right. Communist by choice, communist by conquest. Well, if we're talking about by choice, what is brown? Communist leaning... Yeah, I'd say that, like, Venezuela was communist leaning. Afghanistan. Right here. Right? Through conquest, I'm not so sure, because while the Soviet Union did invade to ensure communist hegemony over Afghanistan, communism was very popular in Afghanistan. Way more popular than the Eastern Bloc, than the Warsaw Pact. It was actually very popular. People there, in polls, you see that they loved it. It was the most progressive the country had ever been. Lao, that's technically how it's pronounced. Don't know much about Lao. However, I know that they are pretty ardent communists. I don't know about... The thing is, like, communist, you could say technically, depends on when this map is from. Like, when it sort of ends, Anyways,
in which the government controlled the whole economy. At this point, we're going to split this movement between its extremes and center. For communism itself, there's no economic justification. Communism's killed 80 million people in a 60-year period.
Oh, 80 million.
More than every religion combined.
Are you sure you don't want to add 20 more million? Are you sure you don't want to do that? What about 30? What about 40? Because people have done that too. Look, if we're going to talk about the death toll of communism, I suppose I'll address it. So, people tend to look at very large-scale spectacles and atrocities which are associated with communism, which exist. I don't deny the Holodomor. I don't deny the troubles of the Great Leap Forward. I don't deny any of these things. However, what I do criticize, what I heavily criticize, is not also critiquing the ongoing violence and the ongoing starvation, which is irrefutably caused by capitalism. Irrefutably. In Africa, in the third world. And it's because it's an ongoing process. And humans, one thing I can say about humans is that we tend to rationalize things in terms of events and spectacles rather than ongoing processes. Now, there are certain things that exacerbate this part of human nature. And capitalism does a good job with the way that media works, but that's a whole other thing. I would say that conservatively, the British Empire killed at least that many people, especially in what's now known as Bangladesh, in India, well, in the British Raj in general, because that was that whole area. There have been historians who have claimed that as well, but they don't get any recognition because why would they? The British Empire is great. It was a good one.
Since the dawn of time. Communism's caused real-term declines in standard of living in every single...
Okay, so wait a minute. He called Venezuela communist-leaning, and then he uses that as an example. Okay, so he's got Cuba here. Cuba is here, and I can't see the years, but you see that they were getting there in, I don't know if this is 1980, no, it says 1960, I think, right there. I think this is 1980. What happened? What would have happened around here that would have caused this schlump? I wonder. It's a rhetorical question. I can't read any of this, even though it's in HD. I wish I could.
Country was implemented in. When you see a split nation like Germany or Korea, the communist side always does worse. Whenever a nation stops being communist like China or Poland, it becomes wealthier. Communists point to stuff like healthcare in Cuba. However, they don't compare it to Chile, who had equal incomes when Cuba became communist and Chile became hard capitalist. Then Chile became far wealthier and so could afford things like healthcare and longer life.
It's because it was getting IMF loans. It's because of IMF loans, dude. You just don't acknowledge this. It got IMF loans because it was completely implementing austerity. Austerity which severely limited social programs which were in place, which were benefiting people. But there's more GDP per capita. The thing is, like, GDP per capita is a useful measure, except when you don't really look at real wages and purchasing power and inflation. Because per capita GDP, you know, could be really cool, you know, if it's really high. But let's say that everything costs just a ridiculous amount of money in that country. Well, then it's, you know, this whole big increase here could be meaningless, effectively. Let's look at inflation in, oh Jesus, I'm spelling everything wrong, in Chile. Graph. Let's look. So around 1973 is when that shit dictatorship came into place. 1973 is when Pinochet and U.S. interests started running the country. Inflation rate. Nothing's showing 1973. This doesn't even show years. What the hell? Inflation went up. It was hell. During the first years of the Pinochet dictatorship. Look at this. So, 1973, they take power. It was already increasing under Allende, I'll give you that. However, they did not much to manage this, which is funny because they were Friedmanite in their economic policy. And he's a monetarist. And so you can see, like, it would have been hell to live during this time. Even if, like, because this whole thing here, that was later. But even then, per capita GDP after that was going down, and inflation was going up. It was hell. There are absolute horror stories from Chile in the 70s, the mid to late 70s. And it's because of this. Again, just like, now let's look at Cuba. Inflation, Cuba graph. Let's look. What's this? Need to go back further. Open image in new tab. Okay, GDP deflator. No, GDP deflator is a different way of measuring inflation. It's a whole other thing. Cuba inflation rate doesn't. Okay, I'm looking for like the same time period. When is this from again? 1980. Oh no, what? 1880. It's the 8 looks weird. So let's say like 72 to now, I guess. Real monthly wage in Cuba went down quite significantly. Again, I wonder what thing would have caused that. I just like it's really bad faith the way that he's arguing. Cause he's basically just saying like, look at this. More money, good. He's clearly a history guy and not an economics guy. Whereas I'm both. You wanna go, man? I'm both. Okay. This might be good. Cuba. Which it's the blue one. Okay. GDP per capita. That's what he was showing. I'm looking for inflation. Where is it? Did they just not have data on this? Whatever. Okay. I'm hungry, man. I want to finish this.
Expectancies, both of which they beat Cuba at
If I
now.
find something,
however,
I'll put
once
it in
you
the
look at
description
countries
later.
with lower grade government programs or lowercase socialism, you find some of the most pleasant places to live in the
Lowercase
world, like the
socialism.
Netherlands or Sweden. These are places.
This guy's a Bernie bro, man. This guy... Hassan agrees with this guy. And this is why the left is losing. This is why the left is no longer actually communist. At least most of them.
With some of the highest standards of living in the world by a lot of metrics, whether happiness, lifespan, wealth, and the like. What's the distinction between Sweden and Venezuela? The key point to understand lifespan,
I
wealth.
like how Luxembourg is the highest. I've been to Luxembourg, actually. I drove through it. It only takes about like a half hour because it's really small, but Luxembourg has really high GDP per capita because it has like no people in it. That's the thing, is like it's per capita. Why do you like Norway doesn't have a very big population? What's the population in Norway? It's just like this is basic statistics. This is basic statistics. Not very many, like very, very, very small population. No wonder it's got such a high GDP per capita. United States, labor aristocracy, imperialism.
Wealth and the like. What's the distinction between Sweden and Venezuela? The key point to understand about socialist government intervention is that the only incentive governments really have is to stay in power. For politicians, they can be voted out of office, but for bureaucracies that normally are the ones who are actually making the decisions about how the economy should be run on the ground, they're not going to get fired even if they screw up. The degree to which the government works is dependent upon how cohesive the society is. Lots of countries...
France, social spending as a share of GDP. OECD. Okay.
Of economic policies pretty similar to Scandinavia. Southern Europe and Latin America both have similarly left-wing
notice
social...
Notice how Canada's even lower than the States. Like, just a little bit. Everyone thinks that, like, some sort of progressive paradise. It's really not. Maybe I'll do a stream about that one day.
Southern Europe and Latin America both have similarly left-wing socialistic welfare programs and taxes as Northern European countries. However, just like capitalism doesn't work in countries without stable rule of law, left-wing economic policies don't work in non-cohesive societies. I remember a Swedish friend once asked me why I didn't support Swedish-style taxes in my home city of Philadelphia, which is notoriously corrupt.
It has a flat tax. What is? %30%. That is for capital gains. Taxation in Sweden. Yes, we're going to Wikipedia, but you know what? They have citations. This is something that you can go to Wikipedia for. There's certain things you can go to Wikipedia for. Certain things you should probably look somewhere else. But 30% for capital gains. Where's income tax? Oh, it does have progressive income tax. Okay. Income over... Even then... 52, it's not bad. But still, capital gains is flat. Corporate net income is taxed. Flat rate of 22%. It still has horrendous inequality, as we saw earlier, from his own map.
To which my reply was, it would all get stolen. In corrupt societies, social programs become unwieldy and inefficient and don't work even if they have more funding. The difference is that Sweden or Japan are countries with low corruption, people rarely go on welfare if they don't need to, and people naturally work hard and don't cheat, since it's a culture where doing so will result in social ostracization. A great example of this sort of thing is that New Jersey equalized the amount of money their public school systems got between regions, and there was basically no educational effect since it didn't change the underlying communities, which were the decisive factor for school outcomes. The thing government is good at is holding businesses and people to standards. Businesses operate under the same incentive structures as anyone else, and so if no one's looking, can be extremely corrupt if it's inside their market interests. A good example of this is the East India Company, which hired cheap mercenaries in the 18th century to conquer India. This precipitated a tremendous amount of atrocities, since the mercenaries weren't accountable to human rights, which forced the British government to step in. The end of slavery in the U.S.
But the government did that, so it's socialism.
Was big government stepping in on local rights. Although I am a right-winger, I think the U.S. should have a public healthcare system, since I think it's better for society if we subsidize the poor's illnesses, since that can ruin people's lives and it's not their fault. Likewise, the government should support things that aren't economic for private businesses, or the results can be horrifying, like the military or roads. Socialists are right to see wealth as sometimes just luck, and so if you gave some things like education, health, safety, and the like to the whole population, the effects would be really good for all of society. Socialists go wrong when they try to overreach, which is realistically something they try to do a lot. This is since government bureaucrats are accountable to no one and normally just keep on trying to expand their influence. The biggest problem in normal...
This is a really deep comic here. It's a really deep cartoon. It's so deep, I can't even see the bottom, man. Look at this. Government, it's an octopus. This is like artistic genius.
Normally just keep on trying to expand their influence. The biggest problem in socialist philosophy is that they think intentions really matter in politics.
This is since they view the pure intentions of the young over the wisdom and knowledge that come with years. This is such a common thing that I hear. I just don't want to respond to it. Because, like, I feel very trapped in my age. I'm 22. And when I say I'm a socialist, every time it's just like, oh, it's because you've never earned your keep for your family and you never supported a family. And it's like, okay, but I want to help people do that better. That's what this is all about. I want to make it easier to do that. That's what it's all about. It's materially improving people's lives, utilizing the technology and the supply chains and the economy itself towards social ends. That's what socialism is. It's what I want to do. I just really don't get that sentiment. I think, like, it's not that I think people should always take the youth seriously. Most young people are idiots. I'll give you that. And I despise being one. I've always felt much older than my peers, but I think it really just shuts down conversation when you're just like, oh, you're just young and stupid and idealistic. Whereas Marxism is, the whole point of it is not to be idealistic.
Politics. That if someone in power has goodwill and is trying to do good, they will. Starting with this line of thinking, they think that everyone that opposes them must be evil, since they're not part of the good people who are trying to fix the world.
Most of these things can be debunked by just reading Capital. Like, if you read Capital, all of this goes away. Marx addresses everything in Volume 1 of Capital that he's saying here. Like, and he did it, like, over 200 years ago. Well, 150 years ago.
Since socialists view themselves as the good people, they don't see their own limitations. An example of this going wrong is rent control. The intention behind rent control is that no one should have to pay insanely high rents, but the result in real terms is that no one's...
Rent control does fail, I will give them that. I think that it's something that the left needs to be honest about. It is fairly concretely demonstrated to not really work out, for reasons that he'll probably explain. Really, what I think... It's the same thing with, like, minimum wage, when people are like, oh, it causes inflation. It's true. It's true. But this doesn't mean that capitalism is a good system and that workers should be paid less. It only, the whole thing with minimum wage is that it demonstrates that a living wage is no longer economically viable under this system. That sustaining yourself off of the base level of income is no longer sustainable. That you can't do it, and there's a reason for it.
Incentivized to build any new buildings, since there aren't enough profits to justify it, since the prices are artificially low. Rent control, whenever implemented, just makes housing more expensive, and when it's removed, housing prices have lowered the total price of rent. A major problem of intentional economic top-down decisions that big government...
Intentional economic top-down decisions. See, this is again the idealism. Is he assumes that the government just decides, let's make more paper, let's make more pencils today. And that's how socialism works. When in reality, it's based on quite a lot of analysis, of demand. Just as it is in capitalism, it's just that it's done towards social ends. And a proletarian dictatorship, like what I advocate, a dictatorship of the proletariat, with figures within its administration that are organically culminated from a revolution in the economic contradictions, the absolving of economic contradictions, as we've seen in China, as we saw sort of in the Soviet Union, as we see in Vietnam, will lead to this sort of very, I wouldn't say it's intentional, I would imply a voluntaristic sort of lens. It's more so that it leads to a government which is more, I suppose, more... I'm trying not to use idealistic terms because this is basically what he's doing, but is more aware of the on the ground, basically. And we saw in the Soviet Union, and we see in China currently, that this is what's happening. That, and not to say that these places were socialist. But we see that this revolutionary government, that this dictatorship of the proletariat, orients the economy such that it's towards social ends. I'll just leave it at that. Oh shit.
Entails is that it normally ends up benefiting the wealthy and powerful, since they're the ones who are already connected to the government and are in a position to do well. Government regulation benefits pre-existing businesses who have the money to adapt. Inflation hurts the poor the most. Eminent domain hurts the poor who don't have the political influence to deal with it. And whenever rationing takes place, organizations like banks are government-owned. It's always the friends of the government who get the rationed opera tickets or the loans. Socialists only look at distribution and not production. They tend to view capitalists as a social class they can just take money from. Look at raising
These cartoons are really funny.
prices, in which they think prices are just
This is
whatever
something you'd
capitalists
see,
say
like,
they
your
are.
uncle
Some
looking at in
socialists
the
go as
newspaper.
far as thinking capitalism and money are just some game we choose to play, rather than immutable rules on how we deal with a world full of scarcity. This
It's based on abstraction, which was useful at a time, back when it originally came about, but it has outlived its usefulness. The immutable rules of society. You could say the same about a lot of socialist states, that it is necessary that they have this system. I don't think that, for example, I don't think Venezuela would be near as well off as it is today. Even though it's not very well off, I think it'd be a lot worse if it would have continued under U.S. interested IMF leadership, IMF aligned leadership. I just don't think that would be the case.
This is why socialists have a tendency to inflate their currencies so much, since money's just a game that we can change, right? Or raise taxes without thinking that if, say, French industry has to compete with less taxed industries otherwhere, it'll be outcompeted or die.
Otherwhere.
Alternatively, how American liberal cities raise taxes for spending only to cause businesses to leave, which means there's less money to spend.
If I was in high school with this guy, I would give him a swirly. And look at me. I'm 130 pounds. I probably couldn't even do it. But I would try my hardest. Because man. I know I said I have a lot of respect for him, but he's got swirly potential. I will hug him and pet him and squeeze him. What is this? And then there's like the Obama logo here. This is Ben Garrison level shit. This is an educated guy. Oh my god.
Socialists seem to view money as a fixed thing to divide rather than something that's produced and alive. A capstone and great example of the twins.
Read Capital, dude. Just read Capital. Like, he completely accepts the labor theory of value. He accepts all these immutable rules that you speak of, but he exposes how they might become, how their abstractions and contradictions may lead to future trouble, which they are currently, and they have been for the past, I'd say, century, even longer, even.
Socialist tendencies of ignoring incentives to look at intentions, and ignoring how things are produced is their support in bailing out of industries. Governments regulate monopolies in that they want to be able to control industries by having a single player they can talk to. However, this ignores how if there was competition, that industry would be so much more efficient and richer for everyone involved. Billing out things like airlines and other similar big government projects are done so as to not create too much pain in the short-term period. But don't look at how bailouts just incentivize those companies to be even more reckless in their spending and say no, they can be bailed out with taxpayer money. Something we need to cover is that socialist economy...
See, this guy doesn't really, recognize hegemony. That these banks, that these corporations have hegemony over the American government. And that's why they're bailed out. He understands, he has a fundamentally infantile view of economics. That capitalism is just simply when the government doesn't do stuff and that socialism is when the government does stuff. Just a second. I have to do this. Wait a second. It's gonna be really funny, I swear.
Socialism is when the government does stuff. And it's more socialism the more stuff it does. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.
Need I say more? Please don't, like, criticize my recommendations. I only watch Infrared to, like, laugh at him. He's really entertaining. I agree with some of his points, but whatever. We can go over him some other time.
These always result in stifling economic growth. And we see this even in wealthy and pleasant socialist countries where, if you look at Europe's percentage of global GDP, it's gone down since the 1960s from 38 to 24% of the world's economy, while the more laissez-faire United States has been able to maintain a quarter.
Big government always kills business.
And this has been the case for every single big government socialist economy in history.
Big government. This is like toilet paper USA stuff, man. Big government. Big government is like the most hilarious phrase in the American political lexicon. Like, it's just so idealistic and voluntaristic. It's like there's no systemic analysis at all. Okay, I don't want to learn about autarky because it's pointless. It just doesn't get to the bottom of like how capitalism has mostly caused all of these inventions, that capitalist interests are behind them. I'm tired. My brain hurts. I've looked at a lot of graphs that basically mean nothing and aren't really cited. And I want to go to bed. It's 7 o'clock right now, and I feel like I have to sleep. Alright? Maybe people will watch this later. Now that I've actually gotten my shit together and learned how to use the program to stream, maybe I'll keep doing this. I enjoy hearing myself talk. Anyways, if you do watch this, thanks for watching. Mom, if you watch this, there's nothing in this pipe. I don't do that. Sage, that's what I smoke out of this. Anyways. Bon voyage. Is that how you say it? Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss.